Now that we have a database class and a user class, I want us to move further along towards the goal of being able to log in to an admin area by looking at the session class. Now, we took a look at sessions before in the PHP with MySQL Essential training. I want us to now look at it with an eye towards making it object-oriented. So to start with, I'm just going to go to TextMate and open up a new window, and I'll save this in the includes folder, and we'll just call it session.php. And we'll start with our PHP tags. And it's going to be class session. That's going to be our session class that we're going to create. Now, if you remember back to what we learned in the Essential training, the session is going to be maintained on the server as a file. And what we're going to do is actually get the cookie for the session automatically sent to us by the browser, and we'll be able to look up what file is there. And then in that file, we can store things. And that way we can actually store the user state. And that's especially useful for things like whether or not they're logged in, because we can remember, hey, this person has been logged in already because I already found their ID and I already marked them in my session file. So every request they make, we just check the session file. We don't have to go back to the database and say, look up this user, see if they exist, see if they're, authenticated, and if not, get their password and so on. We can just keep them logged in. The analogy that I used before was like having a nightclub and having a bouncer that keeps people out. But if you have a hand stamp, then you can come and go as you like. So before we get started, I just want to put a note here at the top, which is that I want you to keep in mind when you're working with sessions that it's inadvisable to store database objects in the session. You can store the ID for the object so that you can go find it again, but you don't want to actually store the entire object. And the reason why we do that is because the objects that are in the session can become stale. That is, that the database can be updated by other users on the system while the session still has an old version of it saved in that file. There also can be pretty large objects too, and that's another reason why you don't want to put them in there, is because there are large amounts of data. It's much better just to store the ID for, let's say, a user's record, and then go back to the database to get a fresh copy whenever we need something from it. So like our database class, we're going to want our session class to exist right away. So I'm going to do the same instantiation at the bottom of the file that we did for the database class. So when this loads, it'll define session, and then it will create one for us automatically. So that means that a lot of the setup that we're going to want to have happen is going to take place in our construct function. If you remember back to what we learned in Essential training, the main thing we need to get the sessions rolling in PHP is session start. And if we issue that PHP command, it gets the session started. It figures out the cookie, and it finds the session for us, so that that's all taken care of. And if there wasn't a previous session, then it creates a new one. Other than including the session file in our index file, this is actually all we need to get session started. It's that simple. We basically have just said, all right, make a new session object, and when you make that object, get the session started PHP, and now we're ready. We have sessions, they're available to us, and we can start working with them here. But because it's an object now, we're going to want to have attributes so that we can keep track of things. So for example, I'm going to want to keep track of whether someone is logged in, and I'll have a flag for that. Another one is the user ID. I'm going to want to have a flag for that. Now the user ID is going to be public because I'm going to be able to ask the session for it. But logged in, I'm actually going to make private so that only the session can figure out whether someone has been deemed logged in or not. That's not something that we can change the value of on our own. So from our application, we can't just say logged in true, logged in false. Now, we certainly could do it that way so that we just handle it from outside the session. But again, we're trying to push all of the complexity about logging in and everything into this session object. So I'm going to create a new function here called check login. And that's going to ask the session, we've already created a session, to see if the user ID is set. And if it is, then it's going to set user ID equal to that value, and it's going to make logged in equals true. If it failed to find it, then it will unset that value and make logged in equals to false. In fact, we can go ahead and say logged in equals false at the start. So now when the construction happens, it would be great if we went ahead and also just ran this method, check the login. So start the session and then find out, is the person already logged in? It works a lot like the way we did the instantiation before. We're setting these attributes based on data that we find. And then even though that's all I'm really going to do here is just establish the fact that they're logged in or not, we could have something else here that said if they're logged in, then do a certain set of actions right away. If they're not logged in, then do another set of actions right away. This is not where we're going to take care of redirecting a user to a login page or anything like that. Don't be fooled by that. We'll take care of that somewhere else. We'll do another test for are they logged in. But this is just a place where we could take additional action, and I just want to highlight that to you. Now that we have a private function for checking whether they're logged in or not, what we're still missing is a public way for us to find out whether the session succeeded or not. So it gets constructed, it marks all the attributes correctly, but then we need a public function I'm calling isLoggedIn, which will check and see, is the person logged in or not? This is like the bank teller being able to go to the bank vault. isLoggedIn has access to this method, but we don't directly. What this keeps us from is being able to write to this method. We can read from it here, but we can't write to it. We can't set this value in any way. Only the class session can do that. Now, there's two other methods that we're going to need here, and those are going to be in the cases when someone logs in from a web page. So they enter their username and password. We want to go to the database, find the user, make sure the password matches and everything. And if it does, then we want to say, hey, session, mark them as logged in now. Even though they weren't logged in when you got set up, now you need to mark them as logged in. So here's the way I'm going to do that. I'm going to write a public function called login. The database will take care of finding the user based on the username and password. If we get sent a user, then take that user ID and set that equal to both the session ID, so it'll be stored for the future, and mark it inside this object, so that the object will also be updated. And then mark logged in as true, since it was marked logged in as false, presumably before they got to that page. And that will then effectively log someone into the page. Conversely, we'll want to log them out as well, so we'll need another function here, public function logout, and it will just unset that session ID so that we don't remember it for the future. It will also unset the user ID here so that that's no longer in effect, and mark logged in as false again. So here now we have a session object that handles everything for us. When we fire up the application, it figures out whether they were previously logged in or not, and we have the ability to test whether they are logged in currently, to log them in, and to log them out, all by just issuing these three simple method commands, isLoggedIn, login, and logout. And now our session class will take care of the rest. Now that we've written our session class, let's look in the next movie at how we can write the actual login and logout pages to make use of this.